to start off with, let's give like a little bit of history of like how we got to where we are today. And I mean, I guess you could maybe go back a little bit further, but this is as far back as I remember at least, and I'm an old guy now. 1994, before there were any of the search engines that you guys would recognize in terms of like typing in something and getting something similar to current Google search results, but there was the Yahoo directory. Does anybody remember this from way back in the day? So this was not a search engine. This was just like a list of websites, but just organized in a certain way, right? And even back then, I mean, maybe you wouldn't call it SEO. Maybe it was just directory optimization or whatever. But if you kind of look up here, there was this little button for adding a URL. And so it didn't take very long for kind of people who were somewhat savvy to like, oh, I can just submit my website. Maybe I'll submit 100, maybe I'll submit 1,000. And you know, I remember even back then, people starting to publish tips that or share tips between each other of like, oh, this is how you get into this certain like well-viewed directory and all this stuff. So even back then, people were starting to try to game the system. And then you move forward a couple years to 1997. Now we start to see a little bit of kind of real search engines, somewhat. And so, anybody remember this one? Ask Jeeves. So this was, so now actually, this website has graduated to today just ask.com. That's what this used to be. But there used to be this nice little gentleman here you can ask questions to. And this search engine did have a crawler, which was an advancement over some of the other previous search engines. And it would go out and crawl your website and index some of the content. But it was very, not very sophisticated. So it would just match up your search terms with websites just based off of the keywords. Like it wouldn't try to do importance, it wouldn't try to do like ranking or anything like that. It's just purely matching keywords, right? So what do you think that people did? Yes, they would just stuff as many keywords as possible into their document. So you see a lot of stuff like this where for my Captain America website, I just literally in the description put Captain America, Captain America, Captain America 1,000 times, and this worked for a time period. You know, obviously like people got more sophisticated, made some changes or whatever, but there was a time that this worked, which is crazy. And a lot of the websites that were trying to like game the system, this is the type of thing that you would do. And then Google came along in around 2000. I mean, they started a little bit before then as a project in Stanford, as like a Sergey and Bryn would have at Stanford their thesis or whatever that they did on how inbound links can help determine the importance of websites or how highly they should rank based off of inbound links. And so Google ended up being really good at, much, much better than Jeeves and some of the other ones that are out there, that they had like really much better results because of this innovation, this initial innovation that they had. But what do you think that happened? Yes, people started gaming the system again, creating link farms. Have you guys ever heard of this term before, link farms? It's basically where you set up a bunch of like fake websites that link to your website, and so it makes it seem like there's a bunch of links coming into your website, but they're all fake links or whatever. And eventually Google figured out ways to like determine that you're doing this and actually turn it from not using it as a positive factor to now today, if you try to use a link farm, they usually find out and it's a negative factor. They'll think you're spam and they'll kind of delist your site. So it doesn't work anymore, but for a time it did. And so throughout history of search engines, there's always been this sort of view of SEO being finding the cheat code. Finding those cheat codes is not the way I like to view things, but it is an inevitable result of having search engines that have a certain set of rules and people who are trying to game the system, trying to get higher in the rankings. So even though you don't want to do this, like it is something that a lot of people almost have to do to some degree. But I guess the key thing is that if you only focus on that, only focus on the tricks, it's like a game. It's a stack of cards. It's very easy to fall down. It's very easy to something that works one day and then it doesn't the next. And you see that all the time. So it isn't something that you ignore per se, but you just don't want to depend everything on it.